The road to Black Hill was not marked on any modern map. It appeared only on an old survey chart that Ahmed's grandfather had left behind, a yellowed paper folded into the pages of a Quran, tucked away in a wooden trunk that no one had opened in 20 years. Ahmed and his wife Zoya had been married for exactly 40 days. They were still in that soft, golden phase of marriage where every glance felt like a secret and every silence felt like a promise. Ahmed was an architect, curious by nature, restless by habit. Zoya was quieter, more watchful, the kind of woman who noticed things before anyone said them out loud. It was Ahmed's idea to visit the old bungalow. My grandfather used to talk about it, he told her one evening, spreading the map across their bed. A big house in the mountains, built by the British, abandoned since before partition. He said our family used to spend summers there. Used to, Zoya repeated. Why did they stop? Ahmed shrugged. He never said. Old people and their secrets. Zoya traced the folded creases of the map with her finger. Something about the paper felt cold, though the room was warm. She didn't mention it. She only smiled, because Ahmed's eyes had that boyish excitement in them, and she loved him too much to say no. They left the city before sunrise, driving north through valleys that grew greener and colder with every mile. By afternoon the roads had turned to gravel, and by evening, to nothing at all. They left the car at the base of a hill wrapped in mist and climbed the rest of the way on foot, following a path that seemed to remember their footsteps before they even made them. The bungalow rose out of the fog like something exhaling after a long sleep. It was enormous, 2 stories of grey stone, with a wraparound veranda, tall windows shuttered in rotting wood, and a chimney that leaned slightly, as if listening. Vines had swallowed one whole wing of the house. The garden, long dead, was a tangle of black branches that clawed at the sky. It's beautiful, Zoya whispered, though she did not know why beautiful was the word that came to her, when everything about the place made the hair on her arms rise. Grandfather said it was the most beautiful house in the province, once, Ahmed said, pushing open the iron gate. It groaned like something waking up in pain. They had planned to just look around before heading back down to find a village inn. But the mist thickened as they explored, swallowing the path behind them, and by the time they realized how dark it had grown, the way down was gone, vanished into grey nothing, as though the mountain itself had decided they would stay. We'll have to spend the night, Ahmed said, trying to sound practical instead of afraid. We have blankets in the bag. We'll leave first thing at dawn. Zoya did not argue. But as they stepped through the heavy wooden doors into the hallway, she felt something shift in the air, like a held breath, finally released. Inside, the house was frozen in another century. Dust sheets covered furniture like shrouds. A grand staircase curved up into darkness. Old portraits lined the walls, their painted eyes following the newcomers with unsettling stillness. They set up in what had once been a drawing room, lit a small fire in the hearth, and unrolled their blankets on the cold floor. Ahmed tried to keep the mood light, telling old family stories, laughing at his own jokes. Zoya laughed too, but her eyes kept drifting toward the doorway, toward the staircase, toward the dark at the edges of the firelight. "Do you hear that?" she asked once, quietly. "Hear what?" "Someone, breathing. Besides us." Ahmed listened. There was only the wind, sliding through the broken shutters like fingers through hair. "It's just the house settling," he said. "Old buildings do that." But Zoya was not so sure. She had felt eyes on her from the moment they crossed the gate, not hostile eyes, not exactly. Something closer to hungry. Something that watched the curve of her face, the fall of her hair, with an attention that made her skin crawl and, strangely, made her want to look away rather than meet it. She did not tell Ahmed this. She told herself it was only nerves, only an old house doing what old houses do to young imaginations. She was wrong. Deep beneath the bungalow, in a place that existed both nowhere and everywhere at once, something had already noticed them. His name, if a name could hold something so old, was Karim. He had lived in the bones of that house since before the British built its walls, since the mountain itself was young. He was a jinn of great age and greater pride, born of smokeless fire, bound to Black Hill by a debt older than memory. Once, long ago, a holy man had trapped him here, not out of cruelty, but mercy, for Kareen in his youth had been reckless with his power, and reckless jinns bring ruin to the mortals around them. For centuries he had drifted through empty rooms, feeding on solitude, growing more shadow than spirit. Families had come and gone. Some he had frightened away with cold winds and moving furniture. Others he had simply ignored, waiting for them to leave on their own, as mortals always did. But something about the girl who had entered his house tonight was different. It was not merely her beauty, though her beauty was undeniable, the way firelight caught the curve of her cheek, the way her dark eyes held both fear and wonder in equal measure. It was something beneath her skin, something Kareen had not felt in an age, a soul that shimmered faintly, like a lamp behind a curtain. Human souls were usually dull, muddy things to jinn eyes. Hers glowed. He drew closer without meaning to, gliding through the walls like smoke through cloth, until he stood, unseen, unheard, in the very room where she sat wrapped in a blanket beside her sleeping husband. Mine, something ancient and foolish whispered inside him. She should have been mine. He knew it was madness. Jinn did not fall for the daughters of Adam, not without ruin following after, for both sides. He had seen it happen before, in old stories passed between his kind. Love between fire and clay always ended in fire consuming clay, or clay smothering fire, and either way, the world lost something it could not replace. But he could not look away from her. That night, Zoya dreamed of a garden in full bloom, the same garden outside the bungalow, but alive, green, and singing with birds she did not recognize. A man stood among the flowers with his back to her, tall and still, wearing clothes from an age she couldn't place. "You are not afraid of me," he said, without turning. "Should I be?" she asked, in the strange logic of dreams. Everyone else was. She woke with a gasp, her heart hammering, sweat cold on her skin despite the freezing room. Ahmed stirred beside her but did not wake. The fire had burned down to embers. And in the corner of the room, where the shadows pooled thickest, she thought, just for a moment, that she saw the shape of a man standing perfectly still, watching her. By the time she blinked, it was gone. Just a dream, she told herself, pulling the blanket tighter. Just an old house playing tricks. She did not sleep again that night. Morning came grey and reluctant, sunlight struggling through the mist. Ahmed woke stretching and cheerful, entirely unaware of the sleepless hours his wife had spent staring at shadows. "Did you sleep all right?" he asked. "Not really," Zoya admitted. "I keep feeling like someone's watching us." Ahmed laughed, not unkindly. "It's an old haunted house, Zoya. Of course it feels like that. It's designed to feel like that. Creaky floors, cobwebs, all of it." "It's not the house," she said quietly. "It's something in the house." He took her hand, serious now. "If you're truly scared, we'll leave the moment the mist clears. I promise." But when they went to find the path down, the mist had not cleared. If anything, it had thickened, a wall of white pressing against the garden's broken fence, refusing to part no matter which direction they walked. Hours passed. The sun rose somewhere behind the grey, warming the air just enough to make the cold bearable, but the way down remained hidden. "This isn't natural," Ahmed finally admitted, frustration edging into his voice. "Mist doesn't sit still like this. It should be burning off by now." "I told you," Zoya said. "Something doesn't want us to leave." They spent the day exploring the house instead, partly out of necessity, partly because Ahmed, despite his fear, could not resist his architect's curiosity. Room after room revealed the ghost of old grandeur, a library with rotted books whose titles had long faded, a ballroom with a cracked chandelier still somehow hanging from the ceiling, a nursery with a wooden cradle gently, impossibly, rocking on its own when they entered. Zoya did not go near the cradle. She pulled Ahmed out of that room quickly, her voice tight. In the library, they found an old journal, its leather cover cracked with age. Ahmed opened it carefully, and though the ink had faded in most places, some pages remained legible. "The house does not want to be empty," one entry read, in cramped, old-fashioned handwriting. "Something lives in its walls that does not wish us harm, yet does not wish us to leave either. My wife says she feels eyes upon her at all hours. I have begun to believe her." Another entry, further along, in shakier writing, "We are leaving tomorrow, mist or no mist. I do not trust what watches my wife from the dark. There is a hunger in it that is not the hunger of a ghost, but of something that remembers what it means to want. The journal ended there. No more entries followed. Whoever wrote this, Ahmed said slowly, never finished the story. Zoya closed the journal herself, her hands trembling slightly. Maybe because the story didn't finish them. As evening fell again, impossibly, the mist showed no sign of lifting, trapping them for a second night. Ahmed grew quiet and thoughtful. He had always been a rational man, the sort who explained ghost stories with drafts and shadows and the tricks lonely minds play on themselves. But two things had begun to erode that rationality: the mist that refused every law of nature, and the look in his wife's eyes whenever she stared too long into empty corners, as though listening to something he could not hear. "Zoya," he said carefully, as they sat by the fire they'd rebuilt. "Has something been speaking to you?" She hesitated, then nodded, ashamed of how mad it sounded. "Not in words. Just feelings. Like someone's trying to be near me. Not to hurt me. Just near me." Ahmed's jaw tightened. Whatever fear he'd been holding back for her sake broke loose at once. "We need to leave. Tonight. Mist or no mist. Ahmed, we can't even see the path. Then we'll feel our way down the hill if we have to. I am not spending another night watching something look at my wife like she's..." He stopped himself, unable to finish the thought. "Like she's his." They gathered their things in haste, Ahmed lighting a torch from the fire, Zoya clutching the journal without quite knowing why she wanted to keep it. As they moved toward the front door, the temperature in the house dropped so suddenly their breath turned to fog in the air. The door, which Ahmed had left unlatched, was now shut, and no amount of pulling would open it. "Ahmed," Zoya whispered, backing away. "It's here." The fire in the hearth guttered, not from wind, but as though something had drawn the very air from the room. Shadows gathered thick in the corners, coalescing, folding in on themselves until they took a shape, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the ghost of old, regal clothing, with eyes like dying embers set in a face too beautiful and too terrible to be entirely human. Ahmed stepped in front of his wife instinctively, torch raised, though the flame seemed to shrink from the creature rather than threaten it. "You are the one," Ahmed said, voice shaking but firm, "who has been watching my wife." The jinn's gaze did not leave Zoya. "She does not belong to a house of stone and dust," he said, his voice like wind through a keyhole, ancient and hollow and sad all at once. "She belongs to something greater. I have waited centuries for a soul that shines the way hers does." "She belongs to me," Ahmed said. "We are married." "We? Married," the jinn repeated, almost gently, almost mockingly. "A contract of clay. I speak of something older than your customs, mortal. I speak of recognition. Of a fire finding the one lamp in 1,000 years worth burning for." Zoya, trembling but finding her voice, stepped slightly forward, not away from her husband, but beside him, her hand finding his. "I am not a lamp," she said. "I am not a prize to be waited for. I have a husband. I have a life. Whatever you feel for me, it does not belong to me, and I do not owe it anything." For a long moment, the jinn said nothing. The fire in the hearth flickered back to life, as though something in the room had exhaled. "You are not afraid of me," the jinn said, echoing the words from her dream. "I am terrified," Zoya admitted, her voice steadier than she felt. "But fear does not mean I will give up what is mine to keep." Something in the jinn's ancient face shifted, not anger, though anger would have been simpler. It was closer to grief. Centuries of solitude, of watching mortal lives flicker past his window like candles in wind, had left him hungry for something he could never truly hold. He had mistaken that hunger for love. Now, faced with her quiet, unshakable resolve, he understood the difference. "I was bound to this house," he said slowly, "for crimes committed in my youth, when I mistook desire for right, and took what was never mine to take. I swore, in my long punishment, that I would not make that mistake again." He looked at Zoya with something almost like shame. "And yet, tonight, I nearly did." The mist outside, Zoya realized with a shiver, had begun at last to thin. "You have a good heart," the jinn said, turning his ember-eyed gaze toward Ahmed now. "Guard it well, architect. Souls like hers are rare in any age. Will you let us go?" Ahmed asked. "I never held you," the jinn said. "The mountain did that, testing whether you were worthy of leaving whole. It seems you are." By the time true dawn broke, the mist had vanished entirely, revealing a clear, cold blue sky over Black Hill, and a path down the mountain that had, impossibly, been visible all along. Ahmed and Zoya did not linger to pack neatly. They left the bungalow at a near run, not looking back until they reached their car at the base of the hill, breathless, hearts pounding with something between terror and disbelieving relief. Neither of them spoke until the gravel road turned back to proper asphalt, and the mountain shrank into the rearview mirror. "Do you believe what happened back there?" Ahmed finally asked. Zoya looked down at the old journal still clutched in her lap, its cracked leather cover warm now, strangely, as though it had absorbed some of the fire's heat. "I believe," she said slowly, "that some houses remember loneliness the way people do. And some things that live in loneliness forget the difference between wanting someone and belonging to them." Ahmed reached over and took her hand at a red light, holding it the way he had on their wedding day, like something precious, something chosen, something entirely, safely his. "Grandfather's stories," he murmured, "just got a lot more believable." Zoya managed a small, shaky laugh, the first since they'd entered the bungalow. But that night, and for many nights after, she would still wake sometimes in the deep hours before dawn, certain, just for a moment, that somewhere far away, on a mist-covered hill, something ancient and lonely was still watching the horizon, waiting for a light it would never see again.